And the way we're going to handle this is that all the panels will introduce themselves. They will not tell their life story. And then they will take about 5 minutes to outline their particular area of interest, the factoids, the news that they want to deliver to you. And we're going to try to have as robust a discussion as we can with lots of questions. Turns out you're all bored and don't want to ask questions, and we'll go back to the panel to do their next 5 minutes, the next elevator that they're waiting for. So we didn't draw lots or anything like that, but I'm going to ask Richard to start out. I know Richard wants to give you a very brief overview. Richard, introduce yourself and get the ball rolling.
Okay, Larry, thank you. Good morning. My name is Richard Kubek. I'm with Long Island Jobs with Justice. I have a few hats to reveal to you. I'm also on the board of Vision Long Island, and I'm chair of the Welfare to Work Commission of the Suffolk County Legislature, and I'm president of the Huntington Housing Coalition. So I'm going to bring all of those together in 5 minutes. Let me begin with the challenge that came at the end of the opening session from Reverend Goodhue about praying for welcoming communities. And as a member of the Vision Board, I have looked with happiness at how we're moving as a community, Nassau and Suffolk, towards smart growth. And you heard some of the progress today in terms of 20 TOD developments. This is all good stuff. But, you know, the unanswered question is, are these new communities, is this vision a welcoming vision? And that's the challenge before us, because we are not a welcoming community when it comes to people of color. So I'm going to kind of draw from a report that the Welfare to Work Commission released on poverty in 2012 to state very quickly in 5 minutes what I think many of you know.
4 minutes now.
No, I already lost a minute. We are, depending upon whose data you look at, if you look at John Powell, we are the third most segregated suburb in the United States. If you look at John Logan, we are among the, I think he's got us at 10th. If you look at Logan's more recent data, and he has a measure of segregation with 60 being highly segregated, we actually got worse in the last 5 or so years. We now have a measure of 74.1 in segregation. More than half of the African American and Hispanic kids are concentrated in just 13 of our school districts. If you look at the 9 of 10 poorest school districts on Long Island, 60% or more of their students are African American or Hispanic. And yet, African Americans are increasing in number within the middle class, but they're stuck. And what we do when we track our kids into these kinds of segregated communities is we track them into lives of poverty, and they lack self-sufficiency, and there's anger, and there's crime, and there's upset. And that's what Elaine Gross calls acting out, because they're tracked. I used to be a teacher. I was a teacher in the days when kids were tracked. I know all about tracking. I know why we gave up tracking. Because it locks people into stereotyped lives. And this is what Long Island is doing. And the data are just so depressing. When you look at these segregated school districts and you look at the performances, just last week, the graduation rates going on to college, Wyandanch, 40%. Plainview, all Beth paid right to it, 92%. That's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. If you look at the test scores, equally outrageous. I'll just compare 2 districts. Brentwood, 50% African American, 75% Hispanic school population compared to Comac, almost all white. Test scores, 4th grade, English standard. Brentwood, 42% at the standard. Comac, 78%. 8th grade math standard. Brentwood, 49%. Comac, 82%. Students attending a 4-year college. Brentwood, 30%. Comac, 79%. That's tracking at its worst. So this is the challenge before all of us who are sitting in this room with some commitment to smart growth, to vision, to redevelopment, to walkable communities, to transit-oriented development. We've got to ask the question, what is this doing to and for people of color? 5 minutes.
exactly on the money. Let's bounce back this way, Michelle, to introduce yourself and take your 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Santantonio. I'm the Executive Director for Long Island Housing Services. There are some familiar faces in the audience, but for those that are not familiar with us, I'd like to share that this is our 45th year of service to Long Island with unique services that we provide as a private not-for-profit agency. We are advocates for fair housing compliance and enforcement, and to that end, we serve our mission. We're very mission-driven, and our mission is the elimination of unlawful housing discrimination and promotion of decent and affordable housing through advocacy and education. Our advocacy includes not only educating people about what their rights are, but how to go about exercising their rights and promoting that people would exercise their rights. Shockingly, there's only between 1% and 13% of the time that people, I'm going to say, bother or are aware enough and have energy enough to protest illegal discrimination when it's suspected and known. And often today, the discrimination is carried out in subtle ways, not only with respect to individuals looking to rent and purchase housing, but also in the area of lending. There's been a great deal of predatory and discriminatory lending on Long Island, which we noted in the early part of this century and tried to be a voice in protest of the practices that we were seeing. I want to say also that we are investigators of discrimination. We are not a government enforcement agency, but we are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, and we are a HUD qualified enforcement organization, which means that we can work for the federal government to investigate claims of discrimination, and we help people to file complaints through the local, state, and federal process that is existing. We have Suffolk County and Nassau County Commission on Human Rights, as well as the New York State Division of Human Rights and HUD's Fair Housing Enforcement Office. We often go into federal court when we have sufficient evidence. A lot of our evidence on individual claims is derived from testing, and testing is where we train people under strict instructions to pose as renters or purchasers or someone seeking a mortgage loan, to determine whether or not people are being given truthful and same similar information, or are they being denied equal terms, conditions, opportunities, being steered to areas of low opportunity in the case of racial minorities. I do, before my 5 minutes run out, want to be able to mention that we are working with the National Center for Suburban Studies, and we are presenting a conference on Wednesday, December 10th at the Hofstra University Club. And we're very pleased to let you know Gustavo Velasquez, who is our new HUD Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, will be present at our conference along with Kristen Clark, the Chief of the Civil Rights Bureau for the State Office Attorney General. The highlight of the conference will be results of studies and research that the National Center for Suburban Studies has been conducting for Long Island Housing Services. Some preliminary surveys will be part of this research, but also a look into the lending patterns on Long Island. I have some flyers here, and I hope before you leave that you're going to be able to take one. And you'll probably, if you're on our list, you'll be getting emails or perhaps a hard copy mailing. Just to give you a little...
While we're shamelessly self-promoting, co-self-promoting, free breakfast and free lunch. And no cost to register.
Yes, free breakfast and free lunch. No cost to register, but you need to register fast because we're already starting to book up, which is absolutely amazing. We have some panels. There'll be an overview of fair housing and fair lending, as well as some community reaction and response. I want to point out that we are currently working on a special project related to emergency housing and shelters. With the help of the Long Island Unitarian Universalist Fund, administered through the Long Island Community Foundation, we've been training staff in emergency shelters and the residents, trying to get them to help them document incidents of discrimination. The big news related to fair housing on Long Island is the local Suffolk County Human Rights Law was amended in September, and that goes into effect on January 23rd of 2015 and will prohibit source of income discrimination, which is any lawful source of income, as well as adding new categories, victims of domestic violence, and gender identity. So there's a lot going on in the field of enforcement. Long Island Housing Services typically gets between 85 and 100 individual claims of discrimination each year, and we actively investigate those with the help of testers. We are going to be having our next tester training session on December 4th. It'll be at Toro Law School, and people have to apply and be screened in order to attend the training. But the courts have held since 1982 that the best and sometimes the only means to get evidence for discrimination is through testing. So if you have an interest in fair housing enforcement and civil rights, I hope you'll check out our tester recruitment flyers, which are also here today. There's much going on.
Great.
They didn't get to yet.
Before I go to Summary, at the expense of making people think, well, my chopped liver too, I just want to recognize two people in the audience. I mean, a lot of people have been working on fair housing issues for a long time. A lot of people have been working on fair housing issues very hard. And some of us have, not me, but some people have been effective. There are two people in the audience who I have to recognize who have done all three. Worked at it a long time, worked at it real hard, and been very effective. Marge Rogatz and Lee Bowser. Two of my favorite activists for the last, I won't say how many years. Well, that'll date me too, don't forget. Solary,
I'm right here.
where'd you go?
It's because
Oh.
we're gonna have to try to figure this thing out here. That's not it.
If you want to talk about parking design and codes, it's all right.
Yeah, but not this time. Anybody in here know, I'm not quite sure where to put this up.
Look for somebody young.
David, where are you?
This won't go into your
We had it up
time.
before. Thank you. Let me just introduce myself while she's doing this. I'm Sol Marie Alfonso Jones. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Long Island Community Foundation. The Long Island Community Foundation was established in 1978, designed and created to, as a grant-making institution, to provide support and resources to nonprofits on Long Island that were and are doing good work to improve quality of life for all Long Islanders, with particular emphasis on helping to ensure that vulnerable populations have good access to equitable living. And Larry took my shirt, took my shine. It's a PowerPoint that says vision. Because I was also going to say something about Marge. Marge has been a longstanding board member of the Long Island Community Foundation, and actually responsible, along with others, in the creation of Erase Racism, which has been doing a significant amount of work highlighting Long Island's unfortunate history of housing segregation and the impacts of that. So, ready? Okay.
Ready, set.
Okay, some of this work has already been, oh God,
You can just use the right left, the
the right one? I think I've
The arrow
already messed it
buttons.
up. Arrow.
Just click anywhere on the screen.
All right, anywhere on the screen. Here we go. This is really bad. There we go. Okay, so some of this is going to be repetitive, so I'm going to go through that really super quickly. Oh, I can do it. So affordable housing, and the promise of the American dream is really the cornerstone of growth and development of the suburbs. Moses, with his cool parks and highways, Ford with his fancy cars, and Levitt and government programs help young families move out of, apartments in New York City into a nice affordable home in the suburbs with good amenities and access to good jobs. That was the case for some people. However, many of those same government and private programs and policies began the segregation patterns that we see today and that have led to inequities that you heard about from Dick in terms of education equality, job attainment, and access to opportunity for people of color. So I want to talk today about two housing problems. So I see we as the foundation focus on housing because it is so linked to opportunities. And we look at it in terms of two issues. One, housing affordability and housing justice. So Long Island counties have the second and third highest foreclosure rates in the city. The state. We have some of the highest cost of living rates in the nation. And those high costs coupled with economic downturn, the housing bubble burst, and Superstorm Sandy have created a severe housing affordability issue. While the idea of coming to the suburbs for piece of the American dream worked for the first few decades after World War II, subprime lending, loss of jobs, and upside-down mortgages contributed to Long Island having some of the highest foreclosure rates in the state. And in addition, housing is generally considered affordable if you spend less than 30% of your total household income on housing, including the utilities. Long Island homeowners are in the top 5 in New York State in terms of housing costs that are above the affordability threshold. And that also pertains to rental homes. Not only do we have fewer rental homes, that mismatch between supply and demand has caused renters also to have some of the highest cost burdens in New York State. And I pointed out, even though we're not second and third, we are about 7 and 8. I just wanted to point out the similarities between Bronx numbers and the Suffolk and Nassau numbers, which they're not too high. Simultaneously, rents have been increasing again because of this mismatch, while incomes have been decreasing. And then you see that 64% of Long Islanders cannot afford a typical 2-bedroom apartment here. That's the housing affordability piece, the housing injustice problem. So we heard some of this between the two speakers. The non-white share of population grew significantly since 2010, and even before that, since 1990. It's been increasing steadily. And in spite of the fact that our population is becoming more diverse, and these trends are happening nationwide. Long Island, using Logan, Long Island is the 10th most segregated county in the nation. And for Black and Latino families, that growth is primarily seen in a few communities. And those are the communities that we heard Dick talk about. So this issue of segregated communities does have an impact on so many of life's determinants: school, quality education, quality and school segregation being very clearly outlined here. It's double the national average. Nassau is almost triple. And as I believe Dick said, more than 1/4 of all rental homes on Long Island are concentrated in 10 communities. So so the correlation of race and poverty combined with racial and ethnic segregation and the concentration of this low-cost housing in certain communities has left many African American and Hispanic residents, as Dick said, in isolated poverty conditions. And this isolated poverty and concentrated poverty perpetuates many of the social and economic disparities that create cycles of disinvestment and affect the outcomes in education and jobs, the access to jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And while many feel like people have opportunities for choosing where they live, regardless of their race, that's just not accurate. Racial steering, exclusionary housing policies, and limited opportunity are the main determinants of where people of color live. Choice is usually not a factor. And a report showed that Erase Racism did show that there are more middle-income African American families living in low-income communities than there are low-income whites. And then the how and the why, there is an assessment of impediments and barriers to fair housing that was done by a group of fair housing and affordable housing and other stakeholders, looking at the Metro New York region and figuring out what was going on vis-a-vis these impediments and barriers, and came up with this list that you see before you, which I'm not going to read because I'm out of time, I know. What can be done. They also came up with a series of recommendations, which we can talk about later, if I have another 5 minutes, and that was 10. And that would be, stronger investigation and enforcement systems that Michelle was talking about, incentives, carrots and sticks to promote zoning and land use practices, community engagement processes that actually help to prepare people to be a part of land use and zoning decisions, investment and policy approaches aimed at revitalizing high poverty areas without actually displacing residents, and then just eliminating other barriers to affordable housing in high opportunity areas.
Yeah, why don't we stop there? In fact, if you want to go back to some of this, and by popular demand, we'll let you, even if you can figure it out, if you can figure it out again, and go back to your PowerPoint. And a legislator has not arrived. So I'm going to throw out the first question. It's a more of a broad-based question observation. Both Eric Alexander and Joy Brown talked about all the energy, all the initiatives that are out there below the radar screen. And it occurred to me that 20 years ago, when I was not a very young reporter, writer at Newsday, but that you couldn't even have a conversation about fair housing, just like you couldn't have it about smart growth and other issues on Long Island, without people frothing and spitting in your face because they were frothing, not because they were spitting at you. And nowadays, it seems that in many of the areas, and I really will get to a question, that there not only can you have a fairly civil conversation, that there is a consensus, a broad consensus among thought leaders, among officials, among activists, developers, of ways to go about doing things. So my question is, does this consensus, which leads us to the brink of action, is it reflected in the fair housing area? Or are we still 20 years or maybe 10 years behind everything else? Dick, why don't you start off with that?
Yeah, we have a grant from the Long Island Community Foundation at the Huntington Housing Coalition to launch, which we've already begun, a public education campaign about the need for rental housing. And we had to make a strategic decision as to what we could do to persuade middle-class white homeowners over the age of 50 that their opposition to rental housing is destroying Long Island. And we made a very tough decision. And the decision was that we were not going to frame the argument around moral and economic justice and social justice issues. We were going to frame it around what appeals to these folks. And that is, if you don't change your attitudes about resisting rental housing, you are in trouble. So we're currently running ads in the local newspaper. We're going out and doing speaking engagements. My colleague Ken Kristen is here. And here's what we're saying. You white middle-class people, you're not going to be able to get out of your home because there's going to be no one to buy your home. Because young people are moving out of Long Island because they don't want to stay here, because they can't find rental housing. Because you have to travel now to see your grandchildren, because they've left Long Island, because we're losing people after spending $300,000 typically educating a kid they're leaving. And it's kind of like those smoking ads, we're trying to scare people. If you don't do this, you're going to get bad stuff. You're going to be stuck in your house. We actually used one of Joy Brown. One of our ads came from a statement by Joy Brown. Are we going to die out here alone? That's the headline. Sadly, we had to make a decision of not doing what we really wanted to do, which was to say, and frankly, you're bigoted. And some of your fears are based on irrational concerns about people of color moving into rental housing, and you really need to deal with that. And we had to make a tough decision, that if we took that approach, we'd kill the campaign. So some of our images have young people of color, Hispanic and black, but primarily we said the opposition remains so intransigent to integrating by race these communities, that we had to scare the hell out of people from another angle, which was purely self-interest. It's a sad comment, but it's our reality.
Yeah, and just to interject a footnote, when I was an editorial writer at Newsday, we had that same quandary. We wanted to beat people up, call them racists, and call, people what they were being, but the reality was that it probably wouldn't work. It wasn't working, it probably wouldn't work, and we moved from what we called the moral imperative to the economic
That's
imperative.
what we did.
And we found that we could have more conversations with people.
Yep.
This was a little, 10 years ago. But we could have more conversations with people that way. And so I hope in hindsight that in moving forward, that it works for you.
Exactly.
Michelle, would you like to comment on this, please?
Well, I've been involved with the issue of fair housing strictly since 1990, and prior to that, worked with the Human Rights Commission. Most of the work there was employment discrimination, not housing, but some of that. I can't say that I've seen a huge change, except in the sense of concerns about economics, because now it's obvious it's not just people of color that can't get affordable housing, it's anybody that can't get affordable housing. So your family's gone, the taxes are overwhelming, and it's just not a sustainable, or forget about moral, it's just has no reasoning whatsoever. People are not yet attuned sufficiently enough to realize what you're saying, that you're injuring yourself by not having that racial and economic integration. There's changes coming aloft with the immigration policy of the federal government. We have a very large and rapidly growing immigrant community on Long Island, and we're doing our best to educate people as to what their rights are, but I have to tend to agree with what Dick is saying. You're not going to necessarily get them because they're concerned with social justice and equity, which is a sad statement when you think of our American ideals.
So, let me just hear from Saul, and then we'll go to the first questions from the audience, and you will be the first question.
Thank you.
I'm just, in line with the whole economic development argument. So we contracted with the Regional Plan Association to do a study that recently indicated, they indicated that a study by the National Association of Home Builders says that building 100 units of rental housing will generate the following every year: $2.3 million in local income, $395,000 in taxes and other revenue for local governments, and 32 local jobs. So it's, the research is there around that. And I agree with my colleagues. The only thing I'll say differently is that from the social justice perspective, we look at how to prepare communities that have been traditionally left out of those opportunities, affordable housing opportunities in high opportunity communities, to have A, the knowledge, B, the links and connections to opportunities that are arising. Because while we do know that there are more affordable rental or multifamily units being developed on Long Island, those opportunities are not always linked to communities of color. Period. And so it's, for us, the Long Island Community Foundation is very, committed to working with organizations that make sure that those opportunities are being linked with all people that need them, including in communities that have typically not been allowed to, move into other places.
You wanted to comment on a comment?
Yeah, I would like to comment just briefly. A lot of our failure to integrate still is tied to some of the local codes and zoning, and how that plays out in terms of putting up obstacles to affordable housing, and keeping places segregated. For example, if a town, a municipality says, well, you can only have affordable rental housing in an owner-occupied two-family if the original certificate of occupancy said that was okay. Or if you have to only have somebody in your accessory apartment who is related by blood, marriage, or adoption, our history is denial. It wasn't until the late, really late in the last century, in the 1960s, where the Veterans Administration and the Federal Housing Administration was directed to stop discrimination and stop leaving out racial minorities from 100% guaranteed VA and FHA mortgages. But we have a lot of work to do, and we're just slowly beginning to climb out. And
Okay, this is not a requirement, but it would be great if you could identify yourself and your organization if you have one. You don't have to if you're not comfortable. So first question.
My name is Margot Cargill. I'm with the Uniondale Community Land Trust. And my question was really to you, in your media outreach, have you also considered the angle of bringing in a youth approach where there is a burning dream that's occurring, and it does have a bit to do with the segregation on Long Island, because you do have the young people who are now becoming middle-aged, such as myself, that these are not the communities that I would want to live in. If you're, of that mentality, which we're getting there more and more with, our age bracket, that this is our world is around us, and we want to be integrated. We want to be a part of a larger family. We don't want to live in those kinds of areas, so we do leave. Not even if we can afford these homes, we don't want to live here, because that's not the community that we want to see for our children.
Yeah, 2 days ago, I took the afternoon off to go and see my second grade grandson's project. They had one of those project days, And the first thing I noticed was that his best friend was in second grade, was a little African-American girl. And they were following each other around, and I said, wow, the world is changing. It's mostly a white school, but there are some black kids. So yeah, we have to draw a line in terms of age. And notice I said it was people over the age of 50 who were white, blah, blah, blah. I think the younger folks have a much different view about race. That's where I'm placing my hope. If not, I would shoot myself. And I think this little, anecdote of my grandson tells a lot. I don't think he knew this little girl was black. Didn't care. And they're best of friends. And they're really nice. So yes, we have a second phase to our campaign, or another phase. It's going on at the same time. It's a Facebook campaign, and it's directed. With Facebook, you can target the audience.
Right.
So we're placing ads on Facebook, people in Huntington between the ages of 20 and 40. And the message there is different. It's your message. It's, if you want to stay, we got to overcome these fears. And by the way, one other thing. The fears that we're addressing, and Joy was kind of fun, I said, we keep changing the name of affordable housing. It's affordable housing. We call it affordable housing in Huntington, but then it became workforce housing, which to me sounded sort of like Stalinist housing, And then it became my least favorite, next generational housing, which suggests that you have to have your own, the genes, my genes, white genes to get in. So affordable housing is a code word for those folks 50 and over. It means they're coming. Blacks are coming, Hispanics are coming, and by the way, it's also class, and poor whites, we don't want them either. I'll end with this. In the 90s, when I was still a teacher and a union officer, playing the old Bethpage, we were going to merge the two high schools. And the one side of town, the Plainview side of town, had homes at the time around $250,000, and the Old Bethpage side had homes of about $350,000. The union did not want to merge the high schools for a whole bunch of reasons, like losing jobs. I wound up at the table with a PTA group that didn't want to merge the high schools. And one woman slammed her hand on the table. She was from the Old Bethpage side, at $350,000. And she said, we can't merge the two high schools. Let's face something. The people on the other side of town are not our kind of people. Think about that. All white, $100,000 difference. There was a class barrier. I mean, we're locked into, Robert Bella told us this 25 years ago, we're locked into tiny little views of ourselves. We live in tiny little bubbles. And so that's what we have to break out of. But truthfully, when you talk to the over 50 crowd, affordable workforce, it's all about their coming, the wrong kind of people.
Yeah.
I was wondering if I could add something. Philip Wyden from the Long Island Board of Realtors.
Yeah.
We've been pursuing, and there's two laws, one in the Suffolk County since '09 and Village of Hempstead since 2012, is co-op discrimination and co-op housing. And it's the biggest unregulated housing discrimination case that has no regulations to it. And it says that a tenant must be given a written reason in writing stating why they're being denied from the co-op apartment. We've run into roadblock after roadblock from most of the governments here besides Suffolk County and the Village of Hempstead. They do not want to let this happen. We've run into opposition both in North Hempstead in past years, City of Glen Cove, Oyster Bay. You name the town that you go to, we've run into opposition from the senators in New York City who don't want to see this happen. And the co-ops are not considered real property when you own a co-op. So you own a share of a corporation as if you own 1/100th of Amazon stock, for instance. So they don't have to give you a written reason in writing. And I just wanted to spread that message because that's one of the things that's not even regulated or talked about, is co-op housing. And it's the last bastion of housing discrimination. Not in terms of there's no discrimination in housing, but that's not regulated under that. So we're fighting to keep that, and we're fighting to get this into law. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Thanks.
Not to put you on the spot at all, and not implying anything in my question, I'm wondering if the Long Island Board of Realtors has undertaken any programs to help realtors deal with issues, any temptations to indulge in blockbusting, redlining?
Absolutely, I'll answer that.
Great, that's
Randy
terrific.
Kaplan, Director
Thank you.
of Government Affairs and Senior Lobbyist for the last 22 years for LIBOR, Long Island Board of Realtors. The realtors receive and constantly have to take updated training, continuing education credits with fair housing, ethics training as well, and I will tell you that not only are the realtors proponents of fair housing, as Michelle can tell you, we worked very closely with Michelle's group in the past. The roadblocks that we've faced in Nassau County and some of the other municipalities is just absolutely scary. And behind the scenes, I'll tell you, many of the lawmakers in years past will say just what this gentleman was saying. Those people, we don't want those people coming in, okay? Elected officials who stand up and talk a good game in front of a room full of 5,000 people will meet privately and say, I don't want those people coming in. Okay, a realtor's job is to show people what's available in their price range in the areas that they want. Okay, other than that, if a person can afford a home, that's what we'll show them. That's what our realtors will show them. They won't steer them to other areas where they, quote unquote, might feel more comfortable. That's not for one of our folks to make a decision on who feels comfortable where. It's what's available in the area you want to look.
Thank you. You want to comment on that? He invoked your name, so you should get
invoked my
first shot.
In a good way.
She may want to run away from that.
That's okay.
I'm joking.
I don't need to run
We're
away
friends.
from it, but I do want to make the point that co-ops and condos are covered by local, state, and federal fair housing laws, and that realtors or realty agents that suffer the loss of a commission because of an unwilling co-op board or homeowners association have the right to file complaints along with the people that they're trying to serve in getting that housing, and they stand to recover their full commission of what they would have lost. So yes, I do see lots of efforts on the part of Long Island Board of Realtors to educate their members. However, I think there needs to be some greater push toward enforcement and seeking compliance, because we routinely over the years have heard lots of anecdotal information about blatant rejections based on race, ethnicity, color, religion, and those complaints aren't coming forward. They don't even have to be, they can be investigated anonymously. So I would like to invite the board to pursue that and think about greater enforcement and realization that, yeah, if these business people are suffering the loss of income because of discrimination, they too stand a chance. But often it is the realty agency that is the frontline witness and can support it even if they don't choose to protest. What we hear is often people are intimidated, they fear they'll be blacklisted and lose business if they were to stand up. But they could still, when we have a case with a realty agent supporting as a witness, that's a win. in for somebody who's trying to move into an area of opportunity.
We have about 12 minutes. In the interest of, I want to get more questions, and you can react to the next question.
On
Hold on a
co-ops,
second.
I just like.
No, hold on, I want to give Leah, I want to
Oh,
get more
sorry,
questions
sorry.
done. Lee?
First of all, I'm going to stand up so you can hear me. I live in a co-op in the village of Hempstead, 239 units. We are about as integrated as it's possible to be. We have someone living in our apartment house, I think from every country in the world. But and so what I'm saying is, get out of Hempstead. We are the recipient of all of the problems that you mentioned, because all of the housing that nobody else wants lives in Hempstead.
Thank you for saying that.
Our school district is 1/2 Hispanic and 1/2 black. If there are any white kids, the percentage is so, there aren't any. There are no white kids in our schools. We have problems related to the segregation that you haven't mentioned. During the summer, we took in my little village, into the school system, so I don't know how many people there are, 1,200 new kids into an overburdened, the poorest performing school district in the county, maybe the bi-county, like that. These kids, they're the kids that cross the border. Who are they living with? They're living, it said in the newspaper, the Newsday, the oracle of all news, because without Newsday we know nothing. They are living with guardians, some are living with relatives.
Lee, I think
Wait,
everybody's
wait.
familiar. Can you just ask, if you have a question, please
Yes,
ask it,
my-
because we're
my
really running out of
question
time.
is,
I love you, but we gotta get to it.
So what are you gonna do about the housing implications? These kids are
Good.
probably
Dick, you wanna take a
living
shot
in
at that? Thank you,
overcrowded
Lee.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'm
Lee.
sorry, I
Thank
need
you,
to qualify something, clarify something. If there were 1,200 new kids in Hempstead, about 300 are the border children. So something's,
Where did you get that? No, I won't.
So let's,
accept
I'll tell you what,
that.
why don't you make that in the 10 minutes to the next session, why don't you guys talk in the whole
yeah,
hour?
so, you know, there's a, but the other point you're making, which happened in Huntington as well, is there are certain communities that become the target for the affordable housing. It was so bad in Huntington that Huntington Station, all of the affordable housing for years was directed into Huntington Station until the United States Supreme Court directed Huntington to stop placing all of its affordable housing in that one community. That's the real deal. I also want to comment on co-ops to show just how bizarre these situations can become. We had in the town of Huntington a situation, in my community, Dix Hills, Half Hollow Hills, where we had a huge creation of a huge number of market luxury senior housing. The town said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to build off-site in Half Hollow Hills affordable housing. The town board then said, but it'll be one-bedroom affordable housing, family housing, one bedroom. Well, that was a 10-year lawsuit that was just settled this past February. The place was called Rulin Road. Here's the settlement. And I commend Frank Petrone for working it out, but here's the settlement. The locals, my neighbors, said, well, okay, we'll accept the settlement, there'll be one bedroom and two bedroom and three bedroom, but they have to be ownership. We don't want rentals, because the wrong kind of people will live there. So the settlement was, well, we'll make it a limited equity co-op. This was Frank's genius, and he got it done. And once we got that done, the board approved it, and the locals were told to shut up, and they did. And so the supervisor said to me, in asking for our support, this will be the future of Long Island. And I said, no, Frank. This is a way to get out of a toxic situation that's been festering in the courts for 10 years. It doesn't address the prejudices against renters.
Thank you, Dick. Michelle, you want to chime in
Just,
first?
you know, related to this real fast, we mentioned this shelter project that we're working on, and what I've learned from some of the shelter staff is that in certain communities, if there's somebody that comes to be housed there, the school district will accept them. So they are then shuffled to another community, such as the areas of impact that we've noted, including not only those in Hempstead, but in Suffolk County, areas like Brentwood, Mastix, fantastic right now, but areas of low income and low opportunity. And that's, it's another example of a policy which is challengeable as illegal discrimination.
Thank you. Questions? Fellow in the beard there, and then we'll go to the woman in front.
I'm David Sabatino with the Regional Plan Association. Two questions that are kind of linked together. Are there efforts to define affordable in terms of what people think visually? So the police officer, the teacher, the mechanic, the urban planner, the people that already live in your communities but are the affordable people, that we're trying to reach. That's a big thing. That's the first question. Second question, how much emphasis should we be putting on design and management? Because I'm finding that when we approach the topic of affordable housing and integrated housing and those things, when you talk about design and management long term, people start to get it. They start to have a pride and a take in it.
Answer one or the other, because we have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's been tremendous strides in management and design, and part of the stereotype is that affordable housing means high-rise, low-income projects. So we've moved away. There are plenty of examples on Long Island of beautiful townhouses. You heard one today designed to look like farmhouses, in the community. There's a lot being done in that way. As for affordability, the range is now anywhere from the poverty level up to 110% of area median. That's how unaffordable Long Island has become. The pressure is to get affordable in the lower ranges. People who are earning 40% of the area median, 60% of the area median. Because when a town is sort of pressured to do something, it's all right, we'll do it, but for the people earning 110% of median, our kind of people.
Sorry.
Excuse me,
Oh,
Larry.
sorry, sure.
I think for everybody, it should be said, the median on Long Island is $105,000
That's right.
a year.
Family affordable.
That's
Huge.
median income.
Double the national.
Sorry.
No, my only point is that the Long Island Community Foundation has been really working to get some of that education material information out, and most recently we provided, with the board's approval, a grant to RPA to do fact sheets that are going to be able to speak specifically to what you're talking about, because when you say AMI to most Long Islanders, they think it's anybody other than them. 40% of AMI, 60% of AMI. That makes up a large, huge percentage of Long Islanders, but yet Long Islanders swear it has a different face,
Exactly.
literally and figuratively. So those data sheets that are being compiled by RPA will really begin to address that, and also look at the housing that we do have on Long Island that is mixed income, and address some of those concerns and fears that Long Islanders have. So, the fact of the matter is that it's not so scary as it pertains to crime. It's not generating more children, et cetera, et cetera.
I promised you a question. We have 4 minutes left, so.
I was just wondering if the panel could speak on any Long Island policy approaches to gentrification that are currently being explored.
Yes, I could.
We try that in the next 3.5 minutes.
We currently have been involved with a situation in the village of Great Neck, in which the developer and manager of a rent-regulated community is seeking to be able to demolish that. And if that happens, they will displace African American and Latinos that have been living there under rent regulation law that is in place since 1974. In neighboring Glen Cove, city of Glen Cove, there's also an effort to demolish affordable housing. And again, it's affecting all African American and Latinos, to replace it with luxury condos. The same is going on in Rockville Center and Providence and Hempstead. We are also in federal court. I just want to quickly mention the issue of residency preferences, as some of the municipalities, when they do develop a few pieces of affordable housing, have set such a bar that only those people that have already been enjoying the benefits of the society are going to be able to tap in. So there's discriminatory policies that are affecting integration that way too, and it's unlawful discrimination. There's also,
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask the last question. Oh, I'm sorry. thought you'd stop.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to ask the last question. I'm just curious of any housing discrimination issues, special initiatives, LGBT community.
For Long Island Housing Services, I have to say we haven't really been approached too often. We've had maybe a handful of such cases over the last, I'll say 3 or 4 years. So we're certainly eager and willing to provide support and testing and complaint assistance, because we do understand that people get denied on that basis routinely as well.
Yeah, no, we have not addressed that issue, but honestly, intuitively, I think we will have greater success addressing that issue than the race and class issue.
Sure, as long as they're not black or tan or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, I think there's a national movement to be more accepting.
Oh, I just, this just in. This just in. We have 5 more minutes. We were told they're expanding the panel, so yes, sir. Oh, he has his hand up.
George Graff, although I work for Nassau County at the moment. In a prior life, I worked in broker finance for a while. Also spent the first decade as an educator. And whereas, Richard, you were speaking, giving some statistics regarding high-need school districts versus ones which were more affluent. Some of these areas, especially these school districts, could become more open, okay, if, as an example, the school districts themselves became more efficient. And I felt, and I worked 1 year in Roosevelt Middle School math and 2 years in Amityville, and it was an eye-opener. I went to be from Hofstra, and also a student taught at places like, where was I, at Plain Edge. So I started out at Plain Edge, which is very upper echelon, taught at these schools here. Many of the problems I felt dealt with the revolving door of administrators. And this is something that does not get addressed, because we'll see in the paper the top 10 superintendents.
It's a fabulous topic. It should be an hour and a half.
But you have 2 seconds on that. So for something for everyone to think about. Okay, I guess the question would be about becoming, as much as we're all involved and worried about segregation and bringing more people together on that, the question is to you then would be, how can we get these high-need school districts to become more efficient and act more in a way that is addressing the needs of their students? And how do we keep these administrators there?
We got the question. Anybody want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I will. And one of the pernicious effects of segregation, and this was demonstrated years and years ago, is that segregated communities turn on one another. So you have, and I did a study, my master's on Wyandanch, and the infighting. I mean, it's bad enough in Plainview, but when you have people literally trapped in a community with all kinds of personal status issues, the infighting tends to become particularly destructive. And I have seen this in Wyandanch. It's been documented over and over again. So it's easy to throw bricks at them and say, why don't you get your act together? It's a little harder when you realize that the teachers there are there to get a better job, the administrators are there to move on, and and then within the community there's just very often, and I've seen this in Wyandanch, awful infighting about who controls the board, who's patronage jobs, much worse than in integrated communities. It's tough, but it's a reality.
And that needs to be addressed. That is part and parcel with what goes on in the community.
Another question?
Mine was very short. My name is Janelle March. I'm a senior at Stony
Could you outside the door kind of keep it down?
I believe, obviously as a young person, there's a huge issue with me finding housing here. It's impossible. There's no way I can do it. And I hear these numbers about what is affordable, and when Mayor Strauss is saying $2,000 a month is affordable, that's insane to me. I could never swing that. So I'd really like to hear what you guys think is the affordable number here. Because, I feel like part of the reason, or part of the way they're keeping races back is by making it unaffordable for any of us.
I don't think that 2,000, I'm going to make it legal panels. I don't know that you, with all due respect, you heard it exactly right. $2,000 would never be, except in the most extreme circumstances with a fairly large family, would never be considered affordable. There are formula, and generally it's a percentage of income based on multiplied or divided by family size. 30% of income tends to be the standard. And the feds, there are programs for 60% of median income, 80%, 100, 120%. Is it going as low as 30%?
Yes, indeed, it should, and it sometimes does.
Yeah,
That's the
but not very often and not enough. So there probably is a program that would fit you. The problem, to my thinking, is that there is a lack of what the developers call product to execute the program. There just aren't places to move in and get your subsidy or get your subsidy's not even there. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious to know where you anticipate developing these units, because are they going to be by universities? Because after students graduate, where are they going to go? They obviously want to stay and take the best things about university. Are you going to put them in the center of what looks like Levittown, or is it going to be somewhere where we don't need a car, where it is this vision of sustainable living?
Well, that is exactly, part of the vision, to identify sites for affordable housing and then try to bring together the forces and the resources that can develop it in areas of the high opportunity, which would include access to transportation and education. It's a huge challenge on Long Island because much of it is already built out, and in other, ways, because of we are a big sprawling Long Island, and some concerns have to be always given to the environment. There's just so much density that this island with its aquifer can support. So I always wonder, when do we get to talk about population planning? That has to be a picture of our society.
That'll be the next conference. So you have your,
Sorry.
do you have your hand up? Do you want to say
I was
something?
just going to say that,
Is that
you're
what done?
absolutely right. That is a, organizations like, since we're here with Core Vision Long Island, smart growth organizations like Vision Long Island, progressive thinkers, both municipal leaders and institutions of higher learning, Hofstra being, really leading in terms of supporting and research on this issue, have indicated that, the best way to do this is to kind of reimagine our failing downtowns and bring them back to where they used to be and get them to a place where young people who are graduating from college, want to be, and that's going to be essential for the future of our region. Otherwise, we're going to lose you all. And I mean, are we going to do any kind of good news? There is good news.
We're even out of the extra time.
There's good news.
Yeah.
There are people.
Thank you. I won't even give an invocation or whatever it comes. Invocation's first. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions. Sorry if I may have seemed rude or